Hey there, welcome to the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. You know, one of the things that we were discussing about this Kamala Harris interview that happened last night is some of the topics that didn't get brought up. Nice that abortion, not only was it not the first and most important topic that was brought up, wasn't brought up at all. Another one's not brought up, healthcare. We'll talk about that, but what did you think was missing from the interview last night? And overall, do you think she helped or hurt her cause? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. My next guest, Dr. Bill Hennessy, is going to have some strong opinions on that healthcare topic. Any guesses on why that wasn't brought up? You know, healthcare costs are sky high as it is, and it's an issue in many elections. Why not this one?
Good afternoon, and follow the money. The lobbyists say leave it alone. The American Hospital Association lobbies $20 million a year to the D.C. politicians, the insurance carriers, $100 million a year. Doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, they got you bought off, and it's 100% guaranteed they're going to let your health care costs go up.
So what do we do about that? Is it too late? I mean, is this an answer for the primary season? Is that what this is?
Yeah, you don't ever look for the government to create the solution here. So I have plenty of solutions, and there's two types of purchasers here that got brought up in the article that I was forwarded today. One is, how does the employee, the health plan member, save money? And the other is, how's the employer? So I'm happy to touch on some saving solutions because we know the problem. It's unaffordable.
Yeah, actually, let's
talk about the solutions.
Yeah, let me catch up the guy listening because I forgot to send the link to him. I sent it to you, but he hasn't seen this. There's a CNBC report that says healthcare costs have hit a post-pandemic high, which makes it even more confounding on why this isn't a bigger issue in the election. You mean to tell me healthcare costs are at an all-time high? And, you know, usually politicians love good crisis because they can rush in and pretend to save you from it. And still, not that big of an issue, even though it's a bigger cost than ever.
The number one, stress in a family. It's financial stress of affordable access to care to balance that off with paying your utilities and groceries.
So this is tough, not just for us on the end user, but especially for people with small businesses or you know, the self-employed people or people with just a few employees under their shop. You know, if you are an employer, what are some of those people? Do they have options on managing these increased costs?
Yeah, on the employer side, don't rely on the health broker. You don't have a health broker. Blue Shield does. They're always going to be loyal to the hand that feeds them. You need an independent consultant to look out for you. And if you have 100 or more employees, think about switching to self-insurance. It saves you 15%. As an employer, you always want to review your medical claims. Get your claims. That has the price of everything. As soon as you see what the price is, you can find ways of saving what you spend on. But if you don't look at it, you're not going to see it. I have more, but you tell me what you're most interested in.
Well, the health savings account, this seems like once you dig into it, I wish the rest of the world knew just from a tax perspective, this is the one magical vehicle where you're not taxed on the income, you're not taxed on the growth, and you're not taxed when you withdraw it or spend it. And I don't think people realize how powerful a health savings account can be. It's
a no-brainer to have a health savings account, to have over $4,000 a year put away to be spent on healthcare needs in that time of emergency. Yes, pre-tax dollars go a lot farther than post-tax dollars. Everyone should have a health savings account. Every patient should ask for his or her price of care before the time of care. Get the first name and last name of who you spoke with, get it sent to you in an email, and hold their feet to the fire. You also don't want to go to the hospital for your routine care, blood work or imaging studies, for example. It's most expensive there. But warning, the electronic medical record system, EMR, of a hospital that employs 2/3 of our nation's physicians only gives the hospital location option. You need to be a little bit more assertive and say, I need to go to a non-hospital option where my care is affordable.
Now, all this sounds good, but I imagine you have about 28 other helpful tips like that. Where can they find you outside of WBAP, Hennessy?
We have a website headquartered right there in Dallas. Care Guide Advocates is the name of the company, and it's cgasaves.com. Solutions for before or after care to save money on care.
cgasaves.com. Dr. Bill Hennessy, I appreciate the time.
You're quite welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir. All right, coming up next, healthcare was not mentioned. Well, look, I'll give you the audio clip because this is one of the things that was on my list anyway that hasn't been heard in the previous 3 shows before I came on. The one little tiny mention of healthcare happens to do with prisoners and their undercarriage. You'll hear it next on The James Show. And your thoughts, if you heard the interview yesterday, do you think it helped or hurt the cause? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. This is The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey, welcome to The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. We got to take a break from the politics for a second because there's something going on in our own backyard that this is going to make you slap your forehead. I got to talk to Texas Scorecard. You know, I would like for Texas Scorecard to come up with more articles that don't make me want to bang my head on the wall, but this is important stuff. We have books that are too obscene to be allowed in the Texas prison libraries, but still available in our kids' school libraries. Sydney Henry from TexasScorecard.com. What the heck is going on?
First, thank you so much for having me on today. And yeah, so the Texas Department of Criminal Justice bans different materials from the prisons, including books or magazines that contain graphic presentations of sexual behavior that violates the law or sexually explicit images. However, we found that some of these books that are on the list that TDCJ banned are still in our school libraries.
Who brought this to y'all's attention?
So this was actually brought to our attention by a lady out in Llano, Bonnie Wallace. She has been traveling across Texas protesting these explicit materials that are accessible to children in schools.
See, I think that's important because the people that listen to WBAP often call me or send me an email or a Facebook message, you know, like, what can we do? How can I make a difference? And look, I don't expect you to do a lot. You can't do what Elon Musk did and go buy your whole social media platform and use it as a bulwark of free speech. But you can do one little thing. And this is one regular person doing one little thing that could turn out to make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. She is very passionate about protecting Texas kids, and she actually told us there's a comment in the article that you can read at TexasScorecard.com, and she tells us that it's just so disheartening that prisoners are better protected than our children.
So one of the books that is on the list that is in the article on TexasScorecard.com, I remember it from parents here in North Texas. I forget which specific school board it was, but they were bringing up some of these books that were in their children's libraries. One of them is Genderqueer. I mean, that one's been brought up in so many of these online videos of parents at school boards across the country. Too racy for prisoners, but A-OK for a middle schooler. That's just such a logical paradox. How is that even a thing?
It certainly doesn't make sense at all. Like you said, if it's banned for prisoners, people who have done hard time because they've committed some kind of crime, but it's still accessible to a 14-year-old or younger, even in some cases, I can't make it make sense. I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. So, I just did a quick search here. The Genderqueer book was in both Fort Worth ISD and Dallas ISD. It got removed from the shelves, but it's still available in Austin ISD and Houston ISD. Do we have any explanation, just logically or legally, on how obscene materials, that if I took this obscene material and I showed it to some kid in the parking lot at the grocery store, I would go to jail, but it's okay to be made available to minor children in a middle school setting? Like, how is that legal? How is that even a loophole?
You know, Texas lawmakers passed HB 900 last session, and part of the goal of HB 900 was to set up state standards for keeping this kind of inappropriate sexual content out of the school libraries and out of the classrooms. They did this. Those standards are in place. It is up to the school districts, however, to implement it. And what some parents are finding across the state is that even when they bring these books, even when they read them before the school board, they're choosing not to remove it.
Right, and we got to give credit to a state rep, Jared Patterson, in our listening area. He's a Republican out of the Frisco district that made that bill happen. But do we have any teeth in that bill? Is there any consequences for school administrators who break that law?
A lot of school administrators, unfortunately, enjoy immunity. So that is not necessarily the case in this bill. In fact, there was actually kind of a theory as to why this bill got through and why, even though the teachers' unions were unhappy with parts of it, why it got through is that no school employees are punished for having these books in the library.
All right. So for parents who are concerned, what can they do to make sure that their libraries are clean of this stuff?
Go Google these books, see if they're check your high school library, see if they're in there, check your middle school libraries, make sure they're not in there for sure. And then raise the issue with your school board members.
All right, Sydney, how do they find more of your work outside of WBAP?
You can go to TexasScorecard.com.
Fantastic stuff. And I recommend signing up for the Texas Minute. It's their daily newsletter, and it fills in that gap. You get a lot of good local news. You get a lot of good national news. This is state level focus, TexasScorecard.com. All right. Does anyone have an explanation on how a book, just legally speaking, can be too obscene for prisoners, but not too obscene for an eighth grader? 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. It's the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to talk about this increase in violence against cops. Assaults on a new report came out that said NYPD officers are at an unprecedented high on assaults, and that's part of a national trend. How is it faring in our backyard? We'll talk about it with my guest in the next segment. But in this one, I have a couple of sound bites that I really thought I would be getting to in the first hour, but a lot of great calls, so it's a good excuse to put them off here. But something we've been watching is the rhetoric. We need to have like a rhetoric meter. Trump already got shot at. He already had another guy pointing a gun at him. We've had a couple of other close calls that have been reported. There was that manhunt in Arizona. There was another dude that had the plot that he was busted on. We've had briefs on 2 Iranian plots that were disrupted. And one of the lessons that we thought everyone would immediately jump on was, well, it's time to, turn down the temperature a little bit on the rhetoric, but they're not. Almost every day, I can bring you an example of Trump being called a fascist. My example today comes from Joy Behar on The View. Trump's a fascist.
All right, let's talk about fascism for a second.
Okay.
Because that came up also. I think that you covered this other part. Mm-hmm. This is the definition. It's defined as a political movement that embraces the far-right nationalism and the forceful suppression of any opposition, all overseen by an authoritarian government. That definition has Trump's picture next to it in the dictionary.
Right.
He wants...
Who the hell's definition is that? I really enjoy watching the pretzel twists that happen because some people need so bad for their worldview to make sense to put Nazism and fascism on the far right. And look, you can go to the Wikipedia page, you can listen to Joy Behar, but it's a fallacy. The only overlap they have with the right is nationalism. Now, nationalism isn't even necessarily a endemically right-wing position. There are plenty of left-wing worldviews that include nationalism, like this version of fascism. You can have a globalist version of fascism. And in fact, you would think out of the National Socialists, fascism started in Italy, Giovanni Gentili and Benito Mussolini. They were actually more of the actual nationalist fascist version of fascism. You would think that Adolf Hitler, with his hyper focus on Aryan and German heritage and traditions and culture and whatnot, he would be the more nationalist one. But you cease to be a nationalist person, nationalist, sure, when he absorbed Austria and the Sudetenland and these people that already spoke German and had a shared culture. But you're not a far right radical nationalist when you start invading foreign countries. Now you're a globalist. When you invade France, when you invade Belgium, when you invade Poland, when you invade Hungary, when you invade the Czechs, when you invade all the other Slavic countries, when you invade the Soviet Union. Yeah, it was the Soviet Union back then. When you invade Russia, you have ceased to be nationalist. Nationalism is not really his driving underpinning force. It was that socialism stuff. But they've got to have that be a right-wing ideology for their worldview to make sense. Because if it's on the left, then you would see, well, all the most disgusting, horrible systems of government that have proven to be the most violent, failed, and just god-awful for the human condition, they're all on the left. See, they need that. So, because they got to have this, well, both sides, no sides have a monopoly on the truth. Both sides are equal. There's bad parts of all political ideologies. Not really. Not like that. There's not a guy who's driven by individual rights and free market capitalism who ends up murdering millions of his own citizens. I mean, the closest thing we had to that was Pinochet, and what did he kill? Like 3,000, maybe 6,000 on the worst. And that's bad. Everyone's a tragedy, but it's peanuts compared to what Castro did or what Stalin did or Mao or Pol Pot or any of these other guys. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. But they've got to have that fascism label, because other than that, there is no terrible thing to put on you. No terrible thing in the Republican Party history. There's no terrible thing in conservative history. There's no terrible trail of failure like you see on the left. We've brought up on this show, like every American atrocity, almost every American experiment that was failed as far as statecraft goes comes from the left. Whether, of course, slavery and Jim Crow and segregation, that was all lefty policies, loved by the Democrats. But then the other ones, like the internment camps in World War II, putting a Klansman on the Supreme Court in the 30s, that was FDR. Then you get into even other like atrocities that are still just god awful, but don't get the amount of attention. Trail of Tears, Andrew Jackson, Democrat. Even when you have things that seem like a benevolent failure, it all goes on one side. And I'm like the temperance movement that came through, and that was more pushed by the left. There was also a big part of the temperance movement. What was the guy's name? William Reeder or something like that. One of the guys that got the amendment passed. He would go on speaking tours and talk about how alcohol was a tool used by the capitalist robber barons to oppress and keep the working class underfoot. It had a tinge of anti-capitalism in it. So they really need to push this. And that's one of the reasons why they don't back off of it. Number one is because they really need this for that cognitive dissonance in their head to be soothed a little bit. I'm not sure if Joy Behar really believes it, or she's saying that because she knows the millions of people who watch will be excited by this in a negative way and be compelled to vote in a way that she would prefer. But the fascism talk is not going away. They're not learning their lesson. They're just going to keep it going and scaring the crap out of people while saying that you are running and voting based on fear. And they're doing this all for politics. Pretty disgusting stuff. Now, the other thing that you didn't see is Joe Biden is out there, and every once in a while he does a public appearance or give a speech or whatever, and you're not seeing it on TV. Fox News doesn't play it, CNN, MSNBC doesn't play it, WFAA doesn't play it, and you're about to see why. This guy is deteriorating by the day. He's like a melting snowman on day 3. The 1 or 2 times in our lives when we got to make a snowman here in Texas. It just melts in like 2 days. This guy's going down that fast. Let me play this. Don't even listen to what he's saying. He just, you can't see his face, but his eyes are wide open, and his mouth stays open like a baby. Or like I saw a guy that was walking down the sidewalk right outside when I was walking in the building today. I saw him right as I came around the corner. I'm like, this dude looks like he's 100 years old. And not to make fun of old people, but he was dressed in normal clothes and had a briefcase. It looked like he was going to work, except his eyes were bugged wide open and his mouth was open and he was kind of walking all stumbly like a toddler. And this is what Biden looked like, sort of like this space cadet face, a toddler face, really.
She beat Trump so badly in the debate, he's scared to death to beat her again. That's a fact. Tough guy, right? Tough guy.
Right. And so then he does some weird pausing thing, and then he comes back. And this dude is unwell. Joe Biden, not doing good. Same
guy. There's 3 other major cases waiting for him when he loses. And by the way, 34 felonies. So far, he hadn't got sentenced. He got the sentence kicked back, but I want to watch that sentence. Look, Donald Trump's not running for you. He's running for himself. I think he's running to stay out of jail.
Sounds from himself. Trying to stay out of jail. Sounds just like Saturday Night Live, doesn't he?
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?
He might have. All right, coming up next, We're going to talk to a retired law enforcement expert on the rise in assaults on our cops. NYPD report got my eye, and I noticed this is a national trend. We'll talk about it next on The James Show. 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. This is News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. You know, there was peak cop hatred, I believe, around 2020. It kind of started with the Michael Brown, and then there was Eric Gardner and Freddie Gray. But then the Summer of Love, the George Floyd riots. We probably felt like that was peak anti-cop sentiment in America. And then things were starting to dwindle since then. In the years since those riots, things were getting better until this year. Man, a report caught my eye about from the New York Post about the rise in attacks and assaults on NYPD officers. And I was like, this isn't a national trend, is it? Turns out it kind of is somewhat of a national trend. Retired Lieutenant Randy Sutton is back on The James Show. How bad is this rise in assaults against cops?
Well, it's astounding, the actual statistics. This last year, almost 70,000 law enforcement officers across the United States were physically assaulted. That is a rise of almost 15,000 since the last previous year. That's incredible. And these officers, when I talk about assaults, they were shot, they were stabbed, they were beaten, they were hit with bricks, they were hit with objects, and many of these officers were permanently disabled in the line of duty, and many have left the service because of those injuries, either physical or then the psychological injuries that resulted from the physical injuries as well. So it is a crisis, and it's one that's being ignored across America.
Right, and if you want to compare it to what the numbers were before COVID, because that sort of throws everything off, and just the New York City numbers, I know we don't like to use that as a pattern for the whole country, but New York City! It's the numbers we have. The number of assaults, they're up 60% compared to where they were in 2019. So if you were wondering how COVID was affected, this is blown right through COVID.
Oh, absolutely. And the question, of course, is why? Why is this happening? And the answer is, unfortunately, pretty transparent. And that is because the criminal justice system has broken down from within in cities like New York. There are no consequences for physical violence. There's no bail policies put into place by the mayor, by the governor, by the city council of New York. And you have a guy like Bragg who would rather prosecute a police officer than prosecute a violent offender. So if there is no fear for the consequences, then of course what's going to happen is these people, especially violent gang members that are being brought into this country through the illegal migration, there is nothing to stop them. Now, remember this, that our police officers are afraid to defend themselves because they will be prosecuted for 15 seconds of ugly-looking videotape, no matter how justified they are in protecting themselves. So we have a system that is in crisis.
How much of this do you think is driven by illegal immigration? Is that a major player?
It's a major player in New York. There's no doubt about that because we have seen they're very highly publicized video accounts of gang members swarming police officers, beating them, and then running off, and no consequences for them either. And in my position as the founder of the Wounded Blue, which is a national organization, a charity that helps injured and disabled officers, these aren't just statistics to me. I mean, I literally talk to these men and women every single day, and I see the consequences. I see police officers who have been not just physically injured, but many of these officers then face psychological injuries because of the way they're treated after they are being injured. Many police officers, I know this is hard to believe, but once they become disabled or physically incapable of doing the job any longer, are literally tossed aside by the very cities that they have sacrificed so much for. And that's why the Wounded Blue exists, is to help those men and women. And it's hard to get your head around that a police officer could be, say, shot in the head, as happened to an Oklahoma police officer, and unable to work any longer, and they just get fired. You're terminated. Have a nice life. That actually happens. And most people, it's hard to get your head around that this actually can occur.
All right, Randy Sutton, you can find more of his work at thewoundedblue.org, thewoundedblue.org. Why would someone want to go to your website there, Randy?
See who we are, see what we do, and if you're a law enforcement officer who's struggling, please reach out to us there.
You know, that's heartbreaking stuff, because not only is it unfair to, cops that are just trying to do their job and make the community a safer place. Think of how this turns away so many good people who are thinking about being cops, who are turned off. Like, I'm not putting up with that, and we all suffer for it. Thank you very much again, Lieutenant Randy Sutton. Well, that's some disheartening stuff. Coming up next on the James Show, we have, in the law enforcement news, we have the FBI revising some of their crime statistics, which is kind of a big deal in the fact that it happens to be one of the fact checks that went against Trump from the moderator in the presidential debate. You remember that? Oh, it turned out that fact check was wrong and Trump was right. You'll hear the receipts coming up next on The James Show. I'm James Parker. This is News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. One of the sneaky stories, super important, but you can see why it's going to get ignored by many platforms, is the FBI silently, without a big press conference or press release, they updated their crime statistics from 2022. You're like, wait a second, what is it, 2024? Why are they doing this? Well, last year in 2023, about this time, it was in September of 2023, they released the crime statistics from 2022. Now, if you're wondering what takes that long, that is something that we've gone over on many James shows in the past, and I can catch you up on that real quick. For crime, you got to wait about 6 months for some of these statistics, and really you got to wait 2 years, because you have to wait until what? A guilty verdict comes down for some of these. You have to wait until it's decided if a crime was even committed in some of these scenarios. So there can be reports of crime. There can be crime cases or charges pending. There's different ways to compile it, but you get a much more accurate answer, and really for the information that you're looking for, the true stuff, if you wait a little bit. So it's not unheard of that these crime statistics get revised. But listen to how this one is a little bit different. It changes the story so much. When they reported the number last year, they said that there was a small decrease in crime, a 2.1% drop in violent crime for 2022. So that immediately got picked up by the Democrats. It got picked up by the media. See, this looks good on Team Biden. Crime is down under Biden and Kamala Harris. We're doing the right thing. Our policies are working. America's getting better. Now, it's still above where it was in 2019 before this whole pandemic thing popped off. But the revision comes down, and it was just changed on the website. Someone noticed. Some genius out there noticed. And now, instead of a 2.1% drop in violent crime for the year, the revision has added over 80,000 violent crimes. Whoops. Thousands more murders, rapes, robberies, assaults. And it turns out instead of a drop, there was a 4.5% increase in crime for 2022 compared to 2021. So this is the only real digestible number we're going to get, 2021 is the first year. It's kind of hard to blame Biden for whatever happens for what goes on in the first 6 months he's in office. You can't blame his policies necessarily for that. But you do expect to start a trend line that hopefully gets better, but it's not. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, it's not going to be a big deal. It should be a big deal. But I want you to go back all the way to last month. I know this feels like it was years ago. But in the one and only presidential debate we had, what was that, September 10th, Donald Trump got fact-checked on this statistic. Here's what it sounded like.
Crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud.
Turns out now we have more information. Trump was right. You could have made the case that he was right when he said that, because we have, what was it, like the 3 biggest metropolitan areas stopped reporting their crime, or they didn't get the numbers in on time. Then when I go read up on what made the FBI do these revisions, I didn't find that they went and got the numbers from these different metropolitan areas and finally included them. I think this is just from cases being adjudicated, just naturally speaking, over the last year or so. So we have a little more resolution or a little more accurate data from the court system. Is that what all the revisions from? I don't have an explanation for you either way. I just have me attempting to make an intelligent guess. But there it goes. You know, the only fact check that I've seen, as far as, you know, like social media fact checks or fact checks from moderators at debates, that hasn't come true or hasn't been 100% proven right, is that the election in 2020 had some shenanigans. All the other ones, everything that I got my YouTube channel taken down for in 2021, you know, for the vaccines, you're still contagious on it, or masks don't work, or saying all kinds of other things that turned out to be true. The virus came from a lab and not from a pangolin kissing a turtle, whatever the real story was. All these fact checks, how come they're always wrong? You know, you can put up a video on YouTube right now that says Bigfoot's real. No fact check. Say something true that's politically disadvantageous to Team Blue. Fact checks all over the place. What a coincidence. I wonder why that is. I guess we may never know. We'll be live at the State Fair of Texas tomorrow. I'm James Parker. Thank you very much for listening to The James Show. If you want to hear more of what I have to offer, I'm reminding you about the James Show podcast. I'm about to go cut it up and put it up at WBAP.com, the WBAP app, and wherever you're already listening to podcasts. Give me a search, look for me, find me, subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.